There once appeared among the vampires a fledgling so puny, tiny, and feeble that its parents worried greatly whether their long-awaited offspring would ever succeed them in carrying on the fame and honor of the vampire race. For when it came time for the vampireling to try its wings, it became apparent that the young thing was not only too weak to attack humans, but was scarcely able to maintain its balance. Its spine, arms, and legs were so soft and light that the slightest wind or even a draught through a house was enough for the vampireling to fall to the ground like an old rag doll, unable even to lift its head on its own. But what caused its parents the most travail was the terrible, inexplicable fact that even after their child lost its baby teeth and the permanent ones grew in, these were more like gelatinous scales filled with grayish fluid than teeth. Such teeth could not scratch, let alone pierce the skin of a human. The claws on the vampireling's front legs were no better. Instead of being able to help the jaws do vampire's work, they grew as tender cartilage, resembling rose petals. Looking at them caused the parents to suffer as though an ashen stake were being driven through their hearts. But even this did not cause the hapless parents the most anguish. Their deepest grief and disappointment sprang from the fact that from birth the vampireling could not bear the sight of, let alone drink, the human blood that its soft-hearted parents initially brought the sickly child in a pouch made from a pig's bladder. At the very sight of even the freshest human blood, the vampireling immediately suffered terrible cramps that threatened to bring its life to a close. Lest they lose their only offspring, the tearful parents, gritting their teeth, were forced to feed their child not healthful and nourishing human blood, but porridge cooked from dandelions and juice squeezed from daisy petals. Finally, the vampireling's parents, who, like all loving parents, had tried every means to remedy the great affliction, lost hope that their child would ever find its way to being a true vampire. With grieving and breaking hearts, they began to consider whether to abandon their degenerate offspring to humans, so as not to bring ultimate disgrace to the vampire race and clan. But one very old, toothless vampire, living out his days in the chimney of a stable that had burned to the ground, to whom the despairing parents had turned for some word of wisdom as a last resort, persuaded them to wait a little longer, and meanwhile to find some decisive and fearless man to serve as nanny to their child. The parents decided that his was wise advice. Barely able to wait until the break of dawn, they immediately set out among humans. But no matter whom the vampires approached, no matter how respectfully they asked, everyone they turned to resolutely refused to undertake any such task, crossing themselves as they spoke. Then, in a wood, the vampires chanced across a man whom misfortune had dogged so long that he had lost any fear of them. Shunning needless hesitation, the vampires talked the man into taking care of their only child for a small remuneration, having also vowed that he would be inviolable to any other vampire. The requirements were that the man carry the vampireling out on walks. In several years it had not grown even an inch, so even now its legs folded together under it like string, and that he cook porridge of dandelions and squeeze daisy petal juice for his charge, the only food that did not bring on its cramps. They came to terms, and the man began to care for the vampireling. Fate had not been kind to the man, and he rejoiced that things had at least taken a somewhat better turn. Now, at last, after long toil and much disappointment, the man had a roof over his head, even if it was among vampires,